Hello everyone, this is Dr. Moore and welcome to this presentation on Chapter 1. What exactly is sociology? Well, let's start by looking at what sociologists do. Sociologists work in a variety of settings, and it's interesting to see just how they use their sociological training on the job. It's also valuable to know how their training in sociology has helped them to be successful. Just imagine if all of our citizens understood how power relationships work in society, or why some groups and individuals have different opportunities, or who is likely to marry whom, and what factors increase cooperation, and which ones increase conflict. Maybe if we all shared a sociological perspective, we could alleviate some of our social problems, and maybe even prevent others. Now, you may or may not agree with this, but in this course you'll have the opportunity to discover the insights available by thinking sociologically. Sociology can open your eyes. It can enlarge and expand your awareness. It can provide the tools to help you understand how your social context influences who you are and what you choose to do. Studying sociology can help prepare you for the future, no matter what job you're in or what career path you choose to follow. Sociology provides a great foundation in many skills that can be useful in a wide variety of fields. These are transferable skills like critical thinking, how to work with others, summarizing and interpreting data, and strong computer skills. At the beginning of each chapter in the text, you'll see some data which helps us understand something called the sociological perspective. This perspective is at the heart of sociology. It recognizes that there are broad societal influences on our decisions and our behavior. Sociologists study societies in order to understand how societies influence us and how we influence society. Sociologists are interested in understanding how the social structure of a society influences individuals. We're born in a society comprised of established values, beliefs, and cultural patterns, all of which converge to form the social structure of a society. Just think of all the fundamental elements that constitute not only your own personal identity, but also how you interact, relate to, and communicate with others in your society. The judgments, critiques, and approvals you make of yourself and others are largely rooted in the logic of social structure. Judgments about poor people as just being lazy have their roots in the American idea that all people who work hard are rewarded for their work. Now, as you study this chapter, reflect on these ideas. How much is personal choice and how much is socialization? What we think of as free will is strongly influenced by the power of society. And just imagine, if you were born in a different society or a different family, how much different your life might be from what it is right now. To emphasize the power of society to affect our lives, here's data showing the chances of living in poverty based on the family you were born into. As you can see, there's a pattern where the odds of being poor jump from 6.1% if you were born to a white married couple to 16%, almost 3 times higher for African American children, all the way up to 23.2%, almost 4 times higher for Hispanic children. The marital status of our parents, as well as race and ethnicity, are associated with the probability of being born into poverty. Let's return to the question, what is sociology? Sociology falls within the realm of social sciences, which are concerned with explaining the social world and human relations. As a science, sociology employs scientific methods to understand the social world. In order to maintain the integrity of the scientific method, sociology doesn't make conclusions that are based on personal experience or popular beliefs. Sociology prefers the use of established data, collecting protocols, and scientific methods of evaluating and analyzing that data. Objectivity or personal neutrality is imperative. Ideally, the data speaks for itself, and it's not influenced by the personal values and biases of the researcher. The reality, however, is that researchers are never entirely value-free. Sociologists address this reality when they're doing research. They identify any potential biases so they can better evaluate the data. A simple definition of sociology is the systematic study of human society. And this requires having a sociological perspective or seeing things sociologically. And this leads us to understand that decisions are made within the context of sociological influences. C. Wright Mills suggested that by using the sociological imagination, we can recognize how the broader system has a profound impact on where one ends up in life. You'll find a link to an excerpt from Mills' book, Sociological Imagination, called The Promise, with the first discussion question. And I encourage you to read this. Mills believed that the task of sociology is to realize individual troubles are linked to broader social forces. Sociologists question the belief that social standing is linked solely to personal abilities and hard work, or the notion of the survival of the fittest. The inequality that exists in society is not necessarily solely due to personal achievements. There are advantages afforded to those of certain social classes. The sociological perspective helps us in some more specific ways. It helps us to see general social patterns in the behavior of particular individuals, the general in the particular. It also encourages us to do something which may seem strange or seem like a strange idea in our individualistic culture, and that is to realize that society guides our thoughts and deeds, so that the sociological perspective can also be used to see the strange in the familiar. Sociology also encourages us to see the effect of our larger society on our personal choices. For example, Emil Durkheim's research showed that the suicide rate was strongly influenced by the extent to which people were socially integrated with others. Durkheim found suicide rates varied by race and sex. Sociologists also strive to see issues in global perspective, which is defined as the study of the larger world and our society's place in it. Global thinking is an important component of this perspective for several reasons. First, where we live makes a great difference in shaping our lives. Secondly, societies throughout the world are increasingly interconnected, making traditional distinctions between us and them less and less relevant. Third, what happens in the rest of the world affects life here in the United States. Fourth, many human problems faced in the United States are far more serious elsewhere. Poverty, for example. And fifth, thinking globally is a good way to learn more about ourselves. Now, this type of thinking isn't just academic, it has practical applications. Applying the sociological perspective is useful in many ways. Sociologists have helped to shape public policy. Sociology influences personal growth. This perspective helps us to assess the truth of what we call common sense. It helps us to see both opportunities and constraints in our lives. It empowers us to be active participants in our society, and it helps us to live in an increasingly diverse world. A background in sociology is also good preparation for the working world. An increasing number of sociologists work in all sorts of applied fields. Let's look briefly at the origins or the history of sociology. Three major social changes during the 17th and 18th centuries are important to the development of sociology. First, there was the rise of a factory-based industrial economy. Then there was the emergence of large and thriving cities in Europe, followed by political changes, including a rising concern with individual liberty and rights. Auguste Comte believed that the major goal of sociology was to understand society as it actually operates. Comte favored positivism, which is a way of understanding based on science and hard data. He saw sociology as the product of three stages of historical development. First was the theological stage, in which thought was guided by religion. This was followed by the metaphysical stage, which is best described as a transitional phase. Finally, the scientific stage, which involved using positivism to understand society. Human societies are very, very complicated, which is why making theories about them is so difficult. A theory is a statement of how and why specific facts are related. Now, when I think of theories, I like to think of theories as a sort of map. They can be very helpful in letting you know how to get from one place to another. And I think that theories look to do pretty much the same thing. They want to map the social terrain. Maps, of course, and theories too, sometimes get outdated. And you use your excursions or your research through that terrain to try to figure out in which ways those maps need to be corrected. Now, sociologists use three general perspectives to guide their thinking and research: structural functionalism, social conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. Okay, let's take a closer look at these three approaches, which we're going to divide into macro-level orientations and micro-level orientation. Under macro-level, which involves a broad focus on social structures that shape society as a whole, we'll find the structural functional approach and the social conflict approach. Now, the structural functional approach sees society as a complex system whose parts work together to promote stability. It asserts that our lives are guided by social structures. These are relatively stable patterns of social behavior. And each social structure, such as educational systems and government, have social functions or consequences for the operation of society as a whole. Key figures in the development of this approach include Auguste Comte, Emil Durkheim, and Herbert Spencer. However, this approach has been criticized and it has declined in recent decades because it focuses on stability, thereby ignoring inequalities created by social class, race, and gender. The social conflict approach sees society as an arena of inequality that generates conflict and change. The key figures in this tradition include Karl Marx, Harriet Martineau, Jane Addams, and W.E.B. Du Bois. Now, one important type of conflict analysis is the gender conflict approach, which is a point of view that focuses on inequality and conflict between males and females. The gender conflict approach is closely linked to feminism, or the support of social equality for women and men. Another important type of social conflict analysis is the race conflict approach, which is a point of view that focuses on inequality and conflict between people of different racial and ethnic categories. Now, this approach has developed rapidly in recent decades, and even though it's popular, an important weakness is that because it's explicitly political, it really can't claim scientific objectivity. Just to review, the structural functional and the social conflict approaches share a macro-level orientation, meaning they focus on broad social structures that shape society as a whole. Now, in contrast, symbolic interactionism has a micro-level orientation. It's a close-up focus on social interaction in specific situations. Symbolic interactionism attempts to explain how meaning is produced in everyday interactions between people. Just imagine walking onto campus and starting a conversation with a fellow student about your sociology quiz. The setting is a college campus, and it creates a stage for how you interact with your colleague. and the impending quiz most certainly colors your mood and thought processes at that particular moment. The symbolic interactionism approach concerns itself with offering theories about how meaning is produced in these types of social settings. The campus, the quiz, and even your colleague are all to a certain extent symbolic in the sense that they represent different aspects of society. And reality is constructed through interactions with others. Some key figures in the development of this approach include Max Weber, George Herbert Mead, Irving Goffman, George Homans, and Peter Blau. So the symbolic interactionism approach is a framework for building theory that sees society as a product of everyday interactions of individuals. Now, this approach has also been criticized. It has two weaknesses. This micro-orientation sometimes results in ignoring the influence of larger social structures, and by emphasizing what is unique, it takes the risk of overlooking the effects of culture, class, gender, and race. Now, each of these three approaches is useful in understanding and answering questions about our society, but each has its limitations. By knowing how to use all of them, we can gain the fullest understanding of our social world. Now, before I end this presentation, I would just ask you to reflect on this question. How does macro-level analysis differ from micro-level analysis?